So how'd you get started caving?
So I started caving in college. We had a caving club that was like not part of the rest of the outdoors club. There was also an outdoors club that did like hiking and camping. Then there was a separate caving club, and I thought that was really cool because they got to like do a bunch of stuff with ropes and rappelling. And every year they ran a rappel, like a learn to rappel practice in a stairwell on campus. And I went to that. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I have to get involved in this. Like, how do I do more of that? So that was sort of how I started getting involved in caving. I went to that practice, and then I actually went to a cave in New England. It's called Knox Cave with the Boston Grotto, and I had a super good time. And I was pretty much hooked on like crawling around in the ground after that.
Nice. Do you know why they use that stairwell?
It's a really tall stairwell and it's sort of triangular, so it's really weird. It's like at the end of a building that's triangular, and then you can like easily access if someone's like starting to like ascend a rope and they're having trouble with it, you could just walk up the stairs to help them out. So that's
I
why you would
see.
do it in a stairwell, so you can help. But it was cool because the building was like 6 or 7 stories tall, so you actually got to rappel a decent distance, which was really, really fun.
That's cool. And then what was your first caving experience? Like, what was it like? Like, I don't know, crawling into the cave.
Yeah, so Knox Cave is pretty cool because it has like 2 sections. There's like a wetter section and a drier section. And I hadn't been to the cave before, but a couple of the people that I was with had. They're like, you have to do the dry section. You won't like the wet section. We're like, okay. I think it has a ladder. So you climb down this ladder into the cave, and then and you're in this big room. It's really muddy. You kind of like scramble around. There's some stuff to like squeeze through. And then there's this like really cool section with it's called the gun barrel. And then there's another section, it's called the gun sight. And the gun barrel is kind of like on the bottom, and the gun sight is on the top. And the gun barrel is this like hole that's kind of like keyhole shaped, kind of like this. And you can just like go through it, and it's not that hard to go through. I'm kind of a small person, so it wasn't that bad. I had a ton of fun. Then I came back and tried to do the gun sight, which is like a much smaller, like sort of circle shaped hole above it. That's only about like 4 feet long, but you have to squeeze through it, and you have nowhere to put your feet. So somebody hoisted me up into this hole, and I was just like trying to squeeze through it for probably like 10 minutes. I wasn't stuck, but I definitely couldn't do it. And it was just really fun. It was like being in a playground. Yeah.
Are you like often, when there is a small passage, are you often the person that gets sent first?
I'm pretty small, so I'm 5'3", but I'm not always the tiniest person in the group. But I do like exploring small passageways a lot. It's really fun. It's just cool to see how far you can fit into stuff. I don't usually get stuck most of the time.
It's a good thing. If you got stuck, and then you'd have to get unstuck. And yeah, I've been there.
Oh,
So,
no.
so tell me about how you met Riley.
I met Riley in college. I met her through the Educational Studies program, which is a student group that we were both involved in, that runs programs for middle and high school students. So the college students, this is not an ad for the program, but it was really fun. So basically we encourage college students to teach classes. Then we invited a bunch of middle and high school students to campus one weekend and like ran basically a bunch of seminars taught by college students on anything. And we got about 3,000 students for the biggest program every year, which is called Splash. So she was involved in that, and we met through that primarily.
And then have you two caved a lot together?
We didn't cave together that much in college. We hung out occasionally in college, mostly like through the student group. And then after graduating, we actually went on a couple backpacking trips together and sort of bonded over enjoying backpacking when everybody else was not enjoying backpacking. So that was pretty fun. It's like extra fun to be on a backpacking trip where somebody else is like having the same experience that you are, which in this case was like we're both having a great time. So after that, I'm not sure we might have caved in New England together like a couple times, but not very often. But we did a trip to Fort Stanton to do some sampling of various pieces of the cave last October, 2 Octobers ago. Time's sort of funny with COVID. I'm like, when did we do that? I don't remember.
Sometime in the past.
Yeah. So I didn't know anything about like taking biology samples. So Riley invited me as someone who had like been in caves and is willing to kind of like suffer a bit, I think. So I got to learn how to take samples, which was really interesting and super fun. We took like a bunch of water samples from the cave, and it was like really awesome and special to get to go to Fort Stanton Cave. That's actually near where I grew up. And it was something I'd grown up hearing about, but had like never been able to go to because it was closed to the public. So it was like kind of like a dream come true to actually get to go there, which is really cool. So that's the most recent cave that we've done together.
Well, and then Riley had mentioned that you built this filtering setup for that trip.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about that?
So that was for the Fort Stanton trip. So one of the samples that we wanted to collect was we basically wanted to see what kinds of microorganisms were in the water in this pool at the end of the cave, because we wanted to compare them to what microorganisms were in like the water outside of the cave. But the concern was that the water in caves like doesn't always have a ton of stuff living in it. So we needed to filter a lot of water through like one filter to make sure that we got enough microbes or whatever it was going to be in the sample. So she asked me to design a filter that, and also like a pump apparatus basically that could pump, I think like 40 liters of water through this like very small filter in like a reasonable amount of time. Didn't have to be super fast, but we didn't want to be sitting in the cave for like hours waiting to filter water through this tiny filter. So basically I like spec'd out a pump. There are like lots of different kinds of pumps. So I like learned about different types of pumps and found a couple that I thought would work, and like got one pump specifically and found a power supply for it and kind of hooked it up to a bunch of filters, made this like ridiculous like filter octopus thing because the filters that we wanted to use, which were 2-micron filters, they were out of the like large flow area versions. So if you want to flow a lot of water through something, you need like a pretty large flow area, or you need a lot of time, or you need your filter to not be very restrictive. So the filters that we ended up getting were these like tiny filters, like it was actually about this big.
Oh, wow.
And the pump had a fixed flow rate, which meant that it was going to just pump out a certain amount of water every second. Like that was just the amount that it was flowing. So we had to put a whole bunch of the tiny filters in parallel because there was too much water pumping out of the pump. So we did that. I also had several other backup options just in case that didn't work, but we tested it outside of the cave and it worked really well outside of the cave. We did our like final sterilization procedure where we flushed some IPA through the filters to make sure they were sterile and we weren't going to take any like non-cave bacteria in, and brought into the cave along with my backup options. We also flushed with IPA just in case. And the pump worked great, but when we pulled the filter manifold out of the bag that we'd been storing it in, it was just destroyed. It looked melted. And it turns out that one of the plastics used in those like very small filters was like not compatible with IPA.
Oh, so it did melt.
So it did melt. It did melt. And I have some like crazy photos of this melted filter apparatus, but we were able to use the backup option, which was just like a standard backpacking filter. And we used the pump to basically pump water into that filter bag, and it went through the backpacking filter. And actually we were able to collect a decent sample from that. So that actually worked out pretty well as a backup option. And the pump was great the whole time. So that was good, at least. Would have taken much longer if the pump had failed for some reason. So yeah.
Do you find anything in the water that was in the cave?
So there were definitely microorganisms in the cave, which is cool. Riley tells me that it's very hard to actually see these microorganisms sometimes because they'll die when they're outside of the cave, and they're hard to detect. But we did see some stuff. So she's working on like comparisons of the, man, I don't know like how well this worked, but it does look like there are some microorganisms that get transported from outside the cave back into the cave, which like makes a lot of sense. But it's a really long cave, and people have never really like, they're not totally sure how the water flows all the way through the caves. They weren't sure like whether the water at the entrance was going to be the same as the water at the exit, and some of it was similar. So that was actually really cool to find. Yeah. So I don't really know anything about biology though. Like I work on fluid systems for like aerospace things. So my understanding of exactly the results that we got is like a little, it's kind of hand wavy.
I see. So then how did you learn about this Alaska thing?
Riley just reached out and asked if I was interested in going to some caves in Alaska, and I said yes because it sounded really cool. She asked if it was okay if it involved backpacking. I was like, oh, like extra yes. I'm super excited about it. So that's kind of how I heard about it. She just sort of sent me an email and was like, do you think this sounds fun? I was like, sounds so fun. So
that was kind of my reaction too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know anything about Alaska? Because I actually don't know very much about what's going to happen.
I don't know what's happening every week. There's like a lot of stuff. There's like a lot of different sort of objectives, I think, every week. So every week is like a little bit different, and there's like a rotating crew of people. So I'm on, I think, the last week of the whole trip. So it's the first week of August, and we're going to go to an island and go look for some caves on an island, which sounds really fun. I will say a lot of my caving adventures have been actually like not in caves. They're like adventures trying to find a cave and then not finding the cave. So it's possible that might happen for that last week, but I think that we know where, like, we have a location of at least a few of them. So yeah, it seems really cool. I'm pretty excited to get out there and check it out. I've definitely never been caving in Alaska. I'm not familiar with the like type of rock, so it should be really, really cool to see. Yeah.
Have you been to Alaska before for non-caving?
Yeah, I went. Okay, this is actually hilarious. I went once before to Denali National Park a long time ago, just to go hiking in the park. And I'm actually going to be in Alaska like 3 weeks before I go on the expedition, because my friend who is from Alaska is getting married there. So I'm spending a lot of time in Alaska this summer, which just sounds like really fun. So I'm excited for that.
The days should be like super long, right?
Yeah.
Are we even gonna get nighttime? Do you know?
So when I was there over the 4th of July, which is sort of a similar time frame, and we were camping, and it didn't really get dark. It got dim. But that was really, I thought it was really cool, but I don't have any trouble sleeping ever. So that probably helps.
I'm like that too. I can sleep anywhere, anytime.
Yeah, so no problems. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Tell me more about your like, what is a regular like, I don't know, either backpacking or caving trip look like for you these days?
Yeah, so I live in SoCal, so there's not a ton of caves around here. They do exist, there are caves, but I haven't been to very many of them. There is an area called Pisgah Crater, which has a bunch of like kind of small lava tubes that you can go explore. And there's some stuff about 3 hours north when you start getting into the Sierras. So I've been to a couple things in the area, but not that much. Typical backpacking trip. I don't know, kind of anything. I just really like being outside and just doing stuff. It's really nice having like a thing that you're doing all day where you're like, I'm going to be hiking for 12 hours and you have a purpose for your whole day. And it kind of, it's kind of like restful, even though you're like struggling up a mountain with a heavy backpack. So, yeah, I'm in SoCal, so I try to go up to the Sierras a lot. That's been really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to live in California. When I moved to California, it was like, because I used to cave in West Virginia when I lived in New York.
Oh,
And
cool.
I was just like, there are no caves here. I mean, there are, but it's
It's just totally different.
yeah.
Yeah. How did you meet Riley or get involved in this trip?
Yeah. I met Riley through my friend Dylan. And I think
Okay.
Dylan and Riley know each other through Teal Fellowship.
Okay.
And then I was on the NSS board for a few years. And
Okay.
shortly after joining the board, I was like, the board would be a lot more fun if my friends were on the board. So I emailed Riley. I was like, Riley, would you consider running for the board? And then that's how we got to know each other better. But I actually, because I was surprised that you and Riley hadn't caved too much together, because I have never caved with Riley. And so I was even surprised that she would ask me to go, because I actually haven't gone caving since I moved to Hawaii. Well, I went to West Virginia last year.
Yeah.
But then COVID, and then we only have lava tubes here, and the cave laws are really strict here because Hawaiians use many caves as burial sites.
Okay.
I've been really hesitant to like push that too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I know Riley.
Yeah.
We work together on the board.
Yeah. I think Riley and I overlapped like just like not in the right state for long enough, because I graduated like a couple years before she did. Or she was like briefly like doing Teal Fellowship things, and so I don't think I knew her like at all then, but then she was like a couple years behind me, and so I moved out to California basically like right after I graduated, and so I was just out here and we like knew each other, and we like knew that we like both did caves, but we've done a bunch. Oh, I should have mentioned this. So we haven't done that many caves together, but the thing to do in Southern California is go canyoneering, because there's no caves. So you just do canyons instead. So we've done some canyons together. Like a decent number. Yeah.
Nice.
So and it's good. Rope skills. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a popular thing for SF Bay Grotto too, is going canyoneering.
Yeah.
Do you ever go up to SF and cave with any of people up there?
I have one friend who is up in SF who is somewhat active in the grotto there, but I haven't been up there very frequently. It's a really long drive, and the flight's kind of like, the flight means you have to go to LAX, which is not good. So yeah. And there's so much to do like around LA. So like I've done some of the canyons around here, but there's like 100 awesome canyons just like in like an hour's drive from where I live. So maybe they're not all awesome, but like, 4 awesome ones, and then like a bunch more like sort of interesting, like good practice kind of like interesting descents. So yeah.
Where in LA do you live?
I live in Manhattan Beach, kind of like North Redondo, Manhattan Beach area. We're right on the border. And I have 3 roommates. We live in like a very old, like surf shack kind of a house. It's pretty cool.
Cool. Do you surf?
I don't surf. I feel like I should because I live here and everybody else surfs. I've just like, it's hard to go surfing by yourself. You really want to go with somebody else, and like then they have to teach you. So yeah. You're in Hawaii. Do you surf?
Every day, almost every day.
Day?
But I didn't surf before I moved here. I lived in Marina del Rey for like a month.
Oh,
and
nice.
Sometimes I would try to go surf by myself, but I don't know. I never really got into it until I moved here. And then, yeah, it's super fun. If I come to California, we can go surf if you have.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. I have never tried. I do swim in the ocean sometimes just for fun. But I haven't tried to surf.
Well, then you already have a head start because I can't even swim. I like can barely swim.
Wow. I feel like surfing is a totally different skill set. So you don't really need to swim. You just
as long as you're still attached to the board. But if you lose your board, then you're pretty much toast. I mean, I can swim. I can float.
Yeah, that's what matters.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other thoughts about Alaska or things that you think the audience should know about Alaska or Riley?
I don't think so.
Do you have any tips for new cavers?
Oh, tips for new cavers. Bring 3 sources of light. Actually, this is something that I learned from somebody here, but I used to carry my like 2nd and 3rd sources of light in my bag. And that's actually not great because you have to like, if your light goes out, you have to like go find them in the dark. So now I like wear 2 of them on my head and keep the 3rd one in my bag.
It's a good tip.
Yeah. Pro tip.
You have 3 sources of light. If you store them in 3 different places.
You could also do that. But yeah, that was cool. That like made my life easier.
What do you like to bring as a snack when you go caving?
Oh, that's a good question. I really like dried mango, but if you're muddy, it's not great because you have to like pull it out of a bag. I also like almond M&Ms and trail mix in general, like in like one of those small Nalgene's, because you can just kind of pour it into your mouth. It's great. Yeah. Or quesadillas. Quesadillas are good too.
Really?
Because they're already squished.
Oh yeah. But then the cheese is not melted anymore.
It's cold. It is very cold, but it's like a cold panini.
That is nice. I had this helmet where you could like stuff a thing inside it. So I'd always like try to bring a slice of pizza in my head.
Oh my God.
On top of my head.
Wow. That's awesome. I think if I saw somebody pull out a slice of pizza, I'd be really jealous. So that's a good idea.
Well, I would share it. I'd share it with you. Okay.
Okay.
I think that's all for today.